from my wife, Vicki, who is in Topeka, Kansas, at the March for Life. And she wants you to know that even though she's in Topeka, Kansas, her avatar is here with you and going to march with you to the Supreme Court.
One of the weirder moments today at the March for Life, Congressman Todd Tiahrt of Kansas shouting out the imagined presence of his wife's avatar. As I say, one of the weirder moments in the March for Life rally in Washington today. It's held on this day, January 22nd, every year because it's the anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Roe versus Wade in 1973. This year, people who didn't want to actually go to Washington could virtually go to Washington and be virtually inspired by the virtual presence of anti-abortion leaders who were virtually there, sort of, too. The anti-abortion activists providing a pantheon of leaders it said were virtually at the march, like RNC Chairman Michael Steele. That's his avatar. Top House Republicans John Boehner and Eric Cantor. See how they made John Boehner a slightly different shade than Eric Cantor? Also, former presidential candidate John McCain looking quite spry. Texas Governor Rick Perry, got to give him credit, they did nail the hair on that one. But as marchers, both real and virtual, denounced the legality of abortion today in Washington and online and in Topeka. On the 37th anniversary of legal abortion in the United States, there was another very stark non-commemoration of today's anniversary. It was in Kansas. Today was day one of the murder trial of Scott Roeder. He's the man who has admitted to shooting Kansas abortion doctor George Tiller at Tiller's Wichita church in May of last year. And in that courtroom today, the first-hand account from the killing from Kathy Wegner. She's the youth director at Tiller's church. She was about 40 feet away when Dr. Tiller was shot and killed. She made the first call to 911.
I saw a flash and heard a popping that to me sounded like a balloon popping, and then I saw Dr. Tiller just fall flat on his back. I just saw him just flat on his back, and I thought, why is he there? And when I saw the flash and heard the gun pop, I looked because it was just right there, and I saw an assailant. I saw with his hand out and still had the gun in his hand.
In this month's issue of GQ magazine, senior correspondent Devin Friedman lays out that same series of events from Scott Roeder's perspective, based on a series of interviews that Devin conducted with Mr. Roeder from jail. Devin Friedman joins us now in studio. Mr. Friedman, thanks very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Why did Scott Roeder talk to you?
I think Scott Roeder talked to a lot of people. I think he couldn't help himself. I mean, this is not something he did because he didn't want a public forum.
Yeah. He talked a lot to you, I know. One of the things that struck me about your article is how long he planned the killing and thought about it. Apparently, he'd been thinking about doing it for years, and he had thought about trying to maim Dr. Tiller instead of kill him.
Yeah, I was surprised, especially before his murder trial, that he would talk about the premeditation in such detail. But I mean, for a decade at least, he was thinking about killing Dr. Tiller, and he thought about cutting his hands off with a machete so that he couldn't perform abortions anymore, and he thought about killing him at his house. And he told me that he thought about getting a high-powered sniper rifle that would sort of go through. Dr. Tiller drove an armored car around, he explained to me how this rifle that you could buy would go right through the glass, and he would actually maybe get away if he used that.
I know that you talked with Roeder about what motivated him, what caused him to want to do this. What parts of the anti-abortion movement or any of the other sort of political and social movements he was associated with fed his radicalism?
A lot's been said, about Bill O'Reilly's show and him mentioning Dr. Tiller a bunch of times on there, and
calling him the baby killer. Right?
Yeah. And Scott liked Bill O'Reilly, and he listened to him on the radio. Scott's not the kind of guy who had cable. He sort of didn't have a job a lot of the time and drifted. But Scott was a real fringe guy, and there's like a body of knowledge out there that's kind of made up. That comes from these fringe groups. There were websites dedicated to it, and Scott recited it all to me as if it were...
What kinds of fringe stuff? What kinds of conspiracy theories?
like that Dr. Tiller, a baby was born alive that was during an abortion procedure, and Dr. Tiller, twisted its neck to kill it, or he purposely pulled off limbs of fetuses, sort of torturing the fetuses, which was weird because I think if you're opposed to what he does, you're opposed to what he does, but I don't see the point of making stuff up.
Right. Well, was he associated with other things beyond the anti-abortion movement? I mean, one of the things we first learned about him was about this previous arrest for being associated with this free men movement, sort of a pseudo-militia anti-government group.
Well, he had a lot of ideas, Scott. I mean, he was interested in the Illuminati. Sort of believed that the Illuminati were controlling us, and he doesn't drink tap water because of the fluoride, and sort of believes that that's a mind control agent. He didn't pay taxes for I think 10 or 15 years because he believes that taxes are illegal, that it's a code instead of a law.
Do you think that he's crazy?
He's not. I don't think that he's schizophrenic. I don't think he's delusional. I think he was very aware of what his decisions were, and there was a logic to them. I know that his ex-wife, who's a really interesting woman, pro-choice. They divorced probably 10 or 15 years ago. She believes that he's a sort of manic depressive, and that in the days leading up, she talked to some people, and he was kind of in a mania state. But I don't think he's crazy.
One of the things that I think has been troubling to those of us who have followed this case so closely and worry about the connection of this individual incident to a larger movement that, in my mind, encourages this sort of extremism. And I'll own that as my opinion in this. I've been pretty open about it on the air. One of the things that seemed worrying is the judge's ruling in this case early on that Mr. Roeder could present almost a justified homicide defense, that it was voluntary manslaughter, that it was, given who George Tiller was, it was appropriate in some ways for him to be killed. How important do you think that ruling was, given what you know about Roeder and his aims?
I don't know the technical, sort of the legal part of that, but I've been in touch with both sides, the lawyers on both sides since the stories come out, and my understanding is that basically what the judge decided is not to preemptively say you can't have that. Not to say I'm not going to say before the trial starts that I won't give the instruction that it can be a second-degree murder rather than a first-degree murder, but I think that there are so many legal hurdles before that can happen that it seems like it's going to be impossible. I think I would not want to be defending him in this trial. It's a pretty uphill battle.
Well, even just what he put on the record with you for this story for GQ is pretty hard to imagine how you don't get convicted of something pretty serious after that. Devin Friedman, senior correspondent with GQ magazine, done extensive interviews with Scott Roeder, who is, as of today, on trial for the murder of Dr. George Tiller. Thanks, Devin. Appreciate it. Thanks for your reporting.